Okay, if nuclear war kicks off, right, I'm claiming that I predicted it. Oh, yes. It's like have a dig back. And during the COVID, I'm like, there's too much dissent to the COVID. It's not working. They need a stronger form of fear-based mind control. And they're going to go back to the old one and they're going to mix it with the new one. They're going to try and scare the boomers with the prospect of nuclear annihilation. I mean, I was way ahead of the game. It's like I could see it. It's like creeping. It's like they're going to have to go back to the old kind of mind control. The old kind of mind control created people like me. Where we say it's different, isn't it, these days, how people are raised and how people are taught. And it's like, well, you know, when I was coming through, they seemed to think that they were going to be fighting a Cold War for the foreseeable future when I was being conditioned through the old school. So they had different ways and means of controlling us. And I'm like, they've just switched those off and stopped talking about them. It's just, but if they get desperate enough, they will reach for them again. When they get really desperate, all of a sudden they're going to have to create a situation as to where the prospect of nuclear destruction is a possibility once again. Get those fucking people under control. Give them something real to worry about. I saw it coming. I'm like, they're going to do that. And now we find ourselves in a situation where I don't care who the fuck's responsible for this. The fact that it's done, it can't be undone. It doesn't matter who did it, and it really doesn't matter who gets the blame at this stage of the game. It's a matter of, right, this has gotten out of hand. Is there anyone here who can talk some sense? Is there anyone here who's willing to negotiate? Because at this moment in time, we are one message away from someone firing a nuclear weapon. And it'd likely be the Russians. And then it'd be a question of, there's something that Peterson said that I agree with, that I get as well. It's like, there's no guarantee, right, that the use of one nuclear weapon would lead to the use of 100 or 1,000. No guarantee. Because what's in it for us? What's the benefit? So it's like the use of one nuclear weapon, in my estimation, used in the right way, because of all the associations to it, and because of the years of preparation and the years of dread and the years of money being spent and all this propaganda, as well as a lot of pockets being lined. It's like they have to get some value from it. And I say, you know, if you to use one correctly, the psychological impact could bring the world to its knees. Just the use of one nuclear weapon. Bring the world to its knees. The psychological impact. You get these fucking twats who are all about climate change and protecting the animals and PETA, and you throw the prospect of nuclear destruction at them. How do you think they'll handle that? The answer is not well. They'll handle it the way they handle everything. They'll become hysterical immediately, everywhere. It's like those who can't, I mean, fundamentally, anyone who can't take a joke is going to be on the street. Governments will fall on the other side of the world with a nuclear weapon used in Europe, with the prospect of what might be next. And then I tell you what, the forces of the fucking elites, the guys who've got the weapons, they then... Deal's done. They're the ones with all the power, all the authority, all the fucking justification for anything that they want to do. It has to stop right now or it gets out of control. Now. It has to be stopped now. There has to be moves made starting now to stop it. But the problem is, right, the guy best placed to stop it cannot remember what he had for breakfast this morning. And the people behind him were handpicked not to know, to protect certain people. They don't know enough about what the world is to be able to reshape the narrative enough in their favour to be able to justify reaching out and saying, we need to have talks, we need to have a summit, we need to thrash this out, we need to have negotiations, and be willing to make compromises to the Russians. There isn't anyone, none of them, they're not equipped for it. Too many other people who aren't involved have too much to lose having a reasoned discourse with all the sides in this conflict. There's no one in the Ukraine who wants to negotiate. They love being the centre of attention of the world. It's like they're getting rich off this. They're really running this job. It's like they're legends in their own imaginations. They're the plucky heroes we always dreamed we all were. Fantasists. And we've got the Europeans who are willing to fight to the last drop of Ukrainian blood. Got fucking dickhead mercs going over to Ukraine, getting themselves caught, and then being freed and being like worshipped on television. Told how brave they are. It's like, you can't be patriotic for Britain and defend it, or be seen to be, but you can go to a foreign country and be a fucking murderous criminal, because that's what you're doing when you enter a foreign war zone. And it's okay for you to shed blood to defend Ukraine from Russia, but if you were to say, oh, I'm a British nationalist, it'd be like, oh, you horrible fucking Nazi. There's not a word of sense. Now listen to Tulsi, okay? I'm going to put Tulsi on. Now the thing is with Tulsi, it's like, I've been accused many times in my life because I was raised by a couple of sisters in a world that just bullies big guys like me into always having been told that I am sexist all the time. Well, you're sexist, because if you're right, it's because you're sexist. If you don't like them, it's because you don't like all women. Yeah? So I've lived in this world as to where it's like, you don't really respect women, John. You're a sexist. Accused of it all the time. And it's a matter of, right, how come when I get to thinking of it, Lieutenant Colonel Tulsi Gabbard, right? If push comes to shove and she was to look me in the eye and say, right, these are your orders, I can't for a minute envisage that I'd be like, it's like, yeah, she's a piece of work. I've got a lot of respect for her. It's like, yeah, she's a leader. It's like, the feminists don't like her because she's not a feminist. What she is an intelligent and very impressive woman who's got a lot of experience. And it's like, well, what's her experience? It's like, she's a combat medic. Oh, yeah, it's like, so she's experienced war at full volume because she's behind the front lines. So when they talk about lived experience is what makes you qualified, who's more qualified than Tulsi? Who knows the cost of war more than she does? And the answer is everyone else who knows the cost of war. Listen to what she's got to say. She's sort of come straight forward, get herself on top of this. Is a short piece. She comes on and she says her piece, and she's right in every word she says. And it's like, you know, in a world where people get a fair hearing or a fair shot, there's a chance she might be president of the United States right now. If her campaign wasn't derailed, if she got to the stage of where she was the nomination up against Trump, she'd have beaten Trump with no funny business, and Trump would have stepped down absolutely gracefully and supported her. How about that? It's like that's how twisted things get. And when things get twisted, the whole world gets in trouble. And this is the depth of the trouble, and she understands it.
Forward. We're honored to have her join us again tonight. Congresswoman, thank you so much for coming on. What do you make of this?
We're reminded once again, Tucker, that we are unfortunately being led by leaders who are selfish and short-sighted and don't care about the American people. They are leading us further and further into war without understanding one of the most basic tenets and characteristics of war, which is it is unpredictable. Once that first shot is fired, once that first punch is thrown, the predictable nature of things, you can plan for things, but it by nature becomes unpredictable. And so they're like, oh my gosh, this thing has become sabotage. Well, yeah, war is unpredictable. The thing that is not unpredictable, however, is the cost of war, the suffering, the devastation, the destruction, the death that is caused by it. And so the real question for the American people and for us to ask our leaders is how much suffering will we have to endure here in this country and for people around the world? Because as you've so clearly stated, we see a sabotage of an energy pipeline today. What's next? Is it access to the internet? Is it satellites that are connected to GPS that power virtually all parts of our life and also our weapon systems? Go on down the line and we end up with this potential nuclear outcome. And so, our leaders are saying, well, hey, we can't do anything. This is all in Putin's hands. Well, guess what? The United States, our leaders and European leaders are the ones fueling and funding this war. So they have a heck of a lot of leverage to be able to push for a ceasefire.
All the leverage, if EU's leaders and Biden had said to the Ukrainians, why don't you honor the treaty you signed and let's not have a war? There wouldn't have been a war. But they enabled Zelensky and made it into a theatre of good versus evil. They manufactured this war out of whole cloth. And the consent for it based on, hey, we were able to tell them anything about that fucking COVID and they believed it. And it's like a matter of, you always see it in people's little banners on the internet where they've all got them Ukraine flags. And next to the Ukraine flag, they've got a little rainbow flag to say they're on board with the gayness. And they've got like a BLM flag and they've got a trans flag and it's like Ukraine. And it's like, you were just given a new bandwagon and you've jumped on it. So now you're Ukraine, so now you can attack these people. Now you've got license to go after these people. Now you've got license to witch hunt Russians. We're making the world a better place with our trolling. So you've got it as to where dissent for this war has been clamped down upon by the mob. So no sense is being talked about it. And if you go beyond the notion of good and evil and absolutism of the sides, you're somehow in bed with the Russians. So this is a really, really, really dangerous situation as to where they've managed to stifle reasonable dissent to what's going on with just the usual tactics of, so you Putin's mayor, is he your boyfriend? They've prolonged this. It shouldn't have started. If Donald Trump was still president, you know what he said to Zelensky? If you honour the treaty you signed with the Russians, right, you don't have to have a war. And if the Russians don't keep up to their side of the deal, then we've got a problem. How about that? Because that's how it was set up to work. But no, they had to change the terms of the deal. It's like this is how short-sighted individuals and a culmination of different calamities all fucking meeting themselves. Like one idiocy bounces into another idiocy, and then the idiots who brought you the last catastrophe gain more power, get themselves elected by default, and say, Well, it was nothing to do with us, the last era. Here's our new era. Here's our next fuck up. And then the other pockets of the world who aren't so deluded are a bit more focused in their thinking, understanding and knowing who they hate a little bit better. It's like they're not focused on we hate the mythical white supremacists, the mythical racists, the mythical transphobes, all these hidden monsters. No, they hate fucking Americans. They've given their enemy a name. It's like all these old forces in the world who'd be like, oh, fucking death to America. It's like you've handed them all the opportunity to do what they want. Someone did this. And it's confounding, and no one can see where anyone would benefit from it. It's a massive escalation. It's an act of war on Russia, right? But it's like, well, who did it? No, it's an act of war on them. It's been done. Someone did. It's been done. You can't point this at anyone. And the game of who blames who and who says what, well, it's just another game. You can't get past the fact that this is done and this is a problem. So what have you had from Biden on this so far? Zero. What have you had from Liz Truss on this at the moment? Zero. It's like they're not talking about this. It's like there ain't no story nowhere. There's a few articles by the likes of The Guardian who are like, why would Putin do this? They've already decided that the Russians have destroyed their own pipeline so they could blame other people. So they've already made it fit the narrative because it can. So it's dangerous. It's so bad. This can be anything to anyone. People in Russia can decide that the Americans have struck at us. People like me who've got a sense of humour and an appreciation of the great wondrous acts of America in foreign policy in the last 50 to 100 years, be thinking, there is precedent for the US escalating or creating an incident that leads to a conflict, gives them an excuse to pile in. They're good for it. They've done it a few times. They're not incapable of this. So the people running polls on the internet saying, who do you think did it? And it comes like 60% of people think America did it. On a little poll run by Sticks. Like 5,000 people, 66% think America did it. You see, what it does is something like this is a shit test, and it like asks you, who do you hate? Who is your imagined enemy? Who would you blame for this? And I'm like, no one's thought that the Irish might have sent a couple of frogmen. Who's to say that Scottish nationalists haven't done this? Just Stop Oil. They've just stopped a gas pipeline. Massive victory for them guys. I mean, wouldn't it be what they'd be wanting to do? It's like you can stick anything on it you like and they will do that for weeks. But then the reality is, the people, this is so unprecedented that the people who are sort of trading in energy and trying to currently stockpile it are now shitting their pants because they don't know what to do. They haven't got enough information to speculate. That's a bad sign. Until someone gets down to the seabed to see what's wrong with that, and then when they get down to the bottom, do you think they've got an interest in telling us the truth, what they find? No. It's like, this is so bad.
Negotiated outcome and an end to this war and to actually fight for peace and prosperity. And we need to know that if they're not doing that, and they aren't right now, then what they are doing is pushing for more destruction, more war, and therefore a lack of peace and prosperity and more suffering for us and people around the world.
If it turns out that the Biden administration actually blew up a natural gas pipeline or okayed someone else's sabotage of that pipeline, shouldn't there be a federal law that prevents them from lecturing the rest of us about climate change ever again?
I don't have the evidence of who was responsible for this. There will be consequences if that is ever found out. But we have the reality of what we're dealing with right before us today, which is if we continue down this path, we may end up with a nuclear holocaust. And so for us and for millions of people around the world, what are we going to do about it? We've got to call on our leaders to actually take a stand and fight for peace, fight for prosperity, fight for our future.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of like your kids to be able to grow up and stuff like that.
Exactly.
Tulsi Gabbard.
Stuff like that.
Yeah, stuff like that. I appreciate you coming on, as always. Thank you.
Oh, yeah. You know, the likes of me who's been, I said for years, I've been like, Jesus wept. The government. It's like they've got control of like these people, these fucking half-wits, right, who lecture us and talk about things that really can't be changed. Concentrate on fighting fights that can never be won. Between them, getting their heads together, have got the ability to like join together and destroy the world. And they've got the weapons to do it. They built them for themselves. What? Yeah. They built themselves a nuclear arsenal so they could forever hold us hostage. So don't you think it's an absurd idea that there's money's been spent on weapons that can just like rain down fucking hell on earth? Really fuck the place up permanently. And the people who've got control of them are politicians. Those lying sons of bitches. Who do you know, if they thought that the people were going to turn up and fucking put them all to the sword, they would nuke us. Why else have they got the bomb? It's for their own protection. Isn't it an absurdity to say, well, how many nuclear armed states in the world are they? Oh, 7 or 8. And most of it, what is it? It's well, if you've got the bomb, it means that people can't get away with threatening you with it. So people threatening nuclear blackmail. You can't be leveraged, we'll nuke you, as if you would. What would that make you? And it come to the stage as to where people be like, well, yeah, you don't deserve to live, do you? Start judging. It's like this process that Peterson talks about. I like it too, this separating the wheat from the chaff. It's like everybody does that. They're just those of us who admit that we are judges. Everyone does it. All the time. All the time, but they just wouldn't admit to it. We all separate the wheat from the chaff all the time. It's part of what our thing is that we call judgment, that we profess not to have or use, but we just use it all the time. It's just part of how we function. And we won't be so far away from in the hatred, or certainly of that mob, as to where they could agree, right? I'll tell you this now. I mean, this might seem like a disingenuous thing to say, but I'll just put it to you. There are those in the world now who, if you ask them who their enemies were, they could tell you. And they wouldn't be able to give them names, but they'd be able to tell you what groups they were members of or what characteristics they had. And if you said to them, well, if you could get them all to go to the same place, would you nuke the place? Would you send them all to an island and nuke them? And they'd say, yes, absolutely. That would be a clever way. That would be a great way of getting away with them. If you can get away with that sentiment and people thinking and speaking like that, you're in a world that will destroy itself. Because to get to, in the end, to get to its enemies, it'll fucking kill you as well. Once it decides that its enemies are within and without, it'll bury itself underground in bunkers and let its enemies destroy each other. Out of fear. What cause of events, what chain of events do you think might lead to a fucking imbecilic fucking idiot like Liz Truss finding herself in a situation where she's fucking locked down with the prospect of, well, it would be the greatest reconstruction project in the history of mankind, rebuilding the devastated Great Britain. Quite, actually, I'll tell you something, you know, right, here's Ming the Merciless thinking. Ming the Merciless thinking is why I worry, right? Ming the Merciless thinking is, well, you know, the British. It's like they are hypocrite fucking arseholes by and large. And you know what? That island of theirs, we don't actually need it. Excuse me. Yeah, if we nuke the place to Kingdom Come, most of the damage would be, well, it would all be isolated to that island. It's like, it wouldn't take much to make Great Britain an exclusion zone. It's hardly in any of the fucking sea lanes, is it really? It's not the centre of the world. It's not the centre of the universe. So we can make a crater of it. Make an example of those fucking people. Great Britain, if you wanted to send a message to the world as to say, do not fuck with us, actually represents the best place to nuke. For population density as well, over the sides of it. Yeah, to smash Britain. Descend it into chaos, turn it into the greatest disaster and aid operation in the history of mankind. Would, if you were on the other side of the world and your economy had become insulated from the effects of the West, that would be a fucking amazing chess move to play to annihilate Britain. To find cause to take out Britain. Yeah, what a fucking move that would be. Tremendous. You'd be like, now you're fucking listening, aren't you? Bring the whole fucking world to the knees without the Russians and Chinese. The rest of the world would look at it and they look at the map. And once the Ming the Merciless thinking that's going on sort of dawned on them, they'd look at it as Britain was getting nuked to bits and they'd say, you dirty rats. Well, they wouldn't do anything about it. Nothing. They'd say, you clever, dirty bastards. But hey, fundamentally, we can do without that place. So do we risk everything for it? And the answer's no. Fuck them. You see, situations like this, that kind of thinking comes to the fore. That kind of thinking takes charge in situations where people's imaginations are out of control and they're all starting to freak out. Strategic thinking people who can put these sort of notions together are all fucking crazy to start with. It's a gift, isn't it? It's like fucking photographic, imaginary fucking simulative thinking. It's like, you're thinking like that, you demonstrate that you can do that as a kid. These days they say you've got Asperger's, don't they, or something, autism. So he's hyper imaginative, fantasist even. It's like, not a fantasist if he's got facts. If he's got facts, he's not being lied to. He's not a fantasist. If he's got facts, it's like he's running simulations. He can see the next thing that's coming. Or he's weighing up. He's weighing up the odds. He can't help it. He's building up the variables, he's weighing up the odds. It's like guys like myself often end up falling into gambling very badly, and I'm someone who knows I've got that kind of weakness, which is why I stay away from that kind of thing, as to where you start to analyse and overanalyze, and then the game of chance destroys you because there's part of it's that are beyond control. It's like you give power in situations like this to people like me. People like me will weigh the odds of, is it worth it? And a guy like me, if push comes to shove, he'd be like, I can make a case to say that yeah, it is, do it. You'd be bold as fuck. It's like, it'd be a move so bold as you bring the world to its knees under your immense fucking power. It's like you could unify the world under like an imperial dictator if you were to show the world the will to do something absolutely despicable like that and then live with it. It's like global dictatorship could emerge from the use of nuclear weapons and its psychological effects on the world. And it's like, for that to now be a possibility means it's over. We've reached that as to where, well, this seems to be to me to be the actual and inevitable road, is because there's no one to reason with. There's no one to turn it off, right? Is Jordan Peterson more famous than Justin Trudeau? Yes. Right? What do you think the chances in this lifetime of those two actually meeting together and having a conversation and actually a conflict? What do you think the chances are of that ever taking place? The answer is it will never happen as long as Justin Trudeau could avoid Jordan Peterson, and that potentially is forever. And that's where we live. That's the place where the leader of the country will never, ever face down the leader of its, basically one of its country's intellectual leaders. Would never, ever allow themselves to be in that situation as to where they could get found out by somebody smarter than them. And that's the world we live in, and that's why we're in fucking deep, deep trouble. I'm like, wow, it's like we're in deep trouble. It's like I've looked at things in the past and there's been, stuff I've kicked off in world, and I've been like, this will stop here, it's a message been sent. Don't worry, the North Koreans aren't attacking us. Don't worry, the escalation in Syria won't lead to World War III. Don't worry, the Iraq thing will stay localised because no one's got any interest in joining in this, and everyone's being paid off. Don't worry about it. I've been Mr. Don't worry about this escalation. Don't worry about this. It'll play out like this for years. But this time I'm like, oh, you fucked here. You're gonna cock-tack yourself. You're gonna force yourself into a situation. You're not even trying to avoid it. It's as if every step you're trying to escalate and provoke. It's like, do you want World War III? And it's like, I think World War III is a massive part of their plan for the Great Reset. A massive part of their plan to be able to push through all the necessary things they need to do to save the world. I think World War III is a massive part of it. Or a simulated or limited nuclear war is what they need and what they're pushing for. And an inevitability. Once they pulled off the lockdown with the COVID, it's like round two. What's round two? Do you know what they're going to do? What are we not afraid of in the world at the moment that we once upon a time used to be very afraid of? Nuclear war. What are they going to bring us in order to push the next step of their great big plan to reform? They're going to show us who's fucking boss with muscle, and they've got a really, really, really well-established and clever way of doing it. Fucking nuke someone. It's that bad.